Let's take a look at how to set up an Azure cloud account and connect your Content Studio libraries to that account so that you can access your content globally. First of all, you're going to need to create a Microsoft Azure account. If you already have one, you can skip this step. You can create a free account. You can click on Get Started, try Azure Free, or sign in. Whichever method you use, it takes you to the same place. We can click on Get Started. You can sign in with an existing account or create a new Microsoft account if you don't already have one. Once you're in, you'll click on the menu and go to Resource Groups, and you're going to create a new resource group. This will by default be a pay-as-you-go. You can choose different options, and the resource group is what you're going to be creating. So typically we would recommend that you create the resource group as your company name, unless you have different departments, and then you might want to subdivide that group a little bit further. Next, you'll need to choose the Azure server which is closest to your region. Then you'll click on Review, have a quick look at the information before you commit, and then click Create. Once you've created that resource group, we're going to create a storage account. So we'll click on Create here. And this is going to use the resource group that you've previously created. And then you're going to create a storage account name. So we would recommend that you create this as Content Studio, so that you know that everything under this storage account is managed by the Content Studio system. You don't really want other file shares being stored under this storage account. Again, you can choose the region. We'd recommend that you use the same one that you use for the resource group. And we're going to accept the defaults for the performance and redundancy. You can choose to review these and alter them as you see fit. We'll click on Review, check the information is correct, click on Create, and then we need to go and view that storage account. So here's our new storage account that's been created. We'll click on this, and then this takes us into that storage account, and we can now create our file share. So once we're in the storage account, which in our case we've called Content Studio Ltd, we'll click on File Share, New File Share, and we'll give it a name. So in our case, we're going to keep all our libraries under one parent folder called Libraries. You need at least one file share. You can call it whatever you like, so it kind of makes sense to call it Libraries. We're accepting the default on the tier, so Transaction Optimize. You can change this if you see fit, and we'll click on Create. Now we have the file share, we need to get the properties so that we can access this. So we'll click on the buttons at the end, Properties, and we're going to copy this URL. We need to convert this URL into a UNC path, so we're going to copy this to clipboard. And before we sort of paste this into Notepad and start altering it, just a little point here that in the same area we can enable backups. We'd highly recommend that you create your own backup cycle, and in here you can set the vault name, resource group, backup policy. So if you're backing up on a certain day or frequency, you can set that up and make sure that it's enabled so that you can restore the library. If you delete some files accidentally, then you can restore the library and retrieve those files. So open a Notepad file and paste in the URL. So the URL will have HTTPS because it's a web address, a URL, and it will have forward slashes. So we need to drop the HTTPS, so convert the URL to a UNC path, which is a file path. So we're going to remove this, and we're going to replace any forward slashes with backslashes. And the example here, you'll see you need to replace this with whatever your URL path is, and it's going to be something like this with your file share on the end. Now we've got this information, we'll put this aside for now. We'll go back into the storage account, and instead of file share, we're going to click on access keys. And this is going to give us our storage account name, which we set up earlier, and that is going to be your Content Studio Cloud username. And then below we've got two keys which are passwords, so you can use this one or you could use the one at the bottom here. Doesn't really matter. We'll click on Show and then copy that to the clipboard. And in this example we've pasted it into the same Notepad file for convenience. So there's our password and there's our storage account name that we created earlier. So now we've got these three key ingredients. We've got the path, password, username. We can then go into Content Studio, click on Settings, add a new library, give the library a name. So the library is going to reside within that folder. So remember, we created a file share called libraries. Our library is going to be called main library. It's going to live over here. And in this case, we've created it as a moderated library. And obviously we need to choose cloud storage. And then we can paste in the storage account name, the access key or password, and the URL path that's being converted to a UNC path. So once you've got those three ready, you can then click on create, and if it's successful, you'll see that the library name gets appended to the UNC path, and you'll get a message here. So that means that it's managed to log into the Azure account using the credentials you've provided, and it's been able to write a folder into that file share called main library in this case. So click OK to exit out of there, and you'll see the first time it gets created, it gets appended to the end of the libraries list. If you close Content Studio and reopen it, it will appear in alphabetical order. But clicking on here, we can see we've got our main library and there's no content in there just yet. So if we go back to the file share, click on that file share just to see what it's done, we can see there's some other test folders there, but in this example we created a library called main library. Everything that sits within this folder is handled by Content Studio. So at this point, Azure, you can log out of it. In theory, you don't ever need to log back in other than for your billing. And this is where Content Studio will manage, it will upload, download, delete, modify information that's stored in this location. So no information within here should be touched, moved, renamed by a user. This is just purely online.